He called them old junk on a Tuesday. I remember the day specifically not because of what he said, but because of the light. Late October, 4:15 in the afternoon. The kind of flat gray light that makes everything look exactly as tired as it is. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the sound from the hallway, cardboard scraping against the floor, something heavier shifting inside a box. I came out to look. Victor was standing by the storage closet, the one at the end of the hallway that had always held the things I hadn't found a place for since moving in boxes from before, things that had traveled with me through postings and transitions and the slow dismantling of a life in uniform. He was holding a showbox-sized carton I recognized immediately. I knew it by the weight of it. "What are you doing?" I asked. He looked up. His expression was the one he used when he had decided something and didn't particularly want to discuss it, matter of fact, already finished with the conversation before it began. "Clearing out the closet," he said. "We talked about this. We talked about the closet. Not about what's in it." He glanced down at the box. "This." He held it slightly higher, as if presenting evidence. "Come on, Natasha. Be honest with yourself. You haven't opened this in 2 years. That doesn't mean it's old stuff." He set the box down on the floor beside the wall, the way you set something down when you intend to leave it there. "Medals, certificates, whatever's in here. It's old junk. You're not in the service anymore. You haven't been for 3 years. Old junk." I looked at the box. Inside it, though Victor had never asked and therefore never known, were 2 commendation medals, 1 Distinguished Service Cross, a unit citation from the joint NATO exercise in 2016, 4 letters of recognition from senior command officers including one signed by General I had briefed exactly once but whose words I had read so many times the paper was soft at the folds, my service identification from the day I was commissioned, and the small laminated photograph of my unit taken in Kabul in 2011. 7 people, Desert Light, half of us squinting. 3 of those people I still spoke to regularly. One of them I had identified at a memorial service 4 years later. Victor didn't know any of this because he had never asked. "Don't throw it away," I said. "I'm not throwing it away. I'm putting it in the storage unit. I don't want it in the storage unit. Then find it another home." He picked up the box and set it outside the front door of the apartment, in the hallway. His version of a solution. "I'll take it down on the weekend." He went back into the living room. I stood in the hallway looking at the box, then I picked it up and carried it to the kitchen table and set it down and made my tea and sat across from it and looked at it for a while, the way you look at something you've been carrying so long that you've stopped seeing it clearly. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Victor and I had been together for 4 years by then. We had met at a friend's wedding. 18 months after my retirement he was charming, unhurried, the kind of man who seems to genuinely enjoy other people's company. He was a civil engineer. He built things. I had spent my career making sure information moved safely through systems that other people would never see. We were different kinds of builders, and for a while that had felt complementary. But there was something Victor had never quite been able to accommodate in his understanding of me, and it was this, that the person I was before I met him was not a previous draft. It was not a rough version that the relationship had improved upon. It was simply me. Fully formed, already. 19 years of it. He didn't see it that way. I knew this not from anything he'd said directly but from the accumulation of smaller things, the way he'd trail off when I mentioned something from the service, as if waiting for me to arrive at the part that was relevant to know. The way he'd introduced me at his work events. Natasha, she used to be in the military, used to be, past tense, filed and completed. The way he'd gotten quietly restless the one time I'd met a former colleague for dinner and come home still buzzing with the conversation. He wanted me to be present. I understood that. But he had confused present with new. What happened with the medals was not a single incident. It was the accumulated weight of 4 years finally resting on a surface and revealing exactly how much it was. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. I put the box in the bedroom. Not because I had a plan. Just because I was not ready to deal with it, and the bedroom was mine in a way the rest of the apartment wasn't. Not completely. Victor said nothing about this. He moved around the apartment with the settled confidence of a man who believed the situation had been resolved. I went about the evening, made dinner, answered some emails, sat on the sofa watching nothing particular on television while Victor read next to me. Normal things. The domestic choreography of two people sharing space. At 8:47 my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number immediately. Moscow prefix, government exchange, the specific sequence of digits that takes a moment to place and then places itself all at once. I stood up and walked to the hallway. Sokolova, I said, which was the only way I had ever answered a call I didn't recognize. Natalia Ivanovna Sokolova. The voice was formal, unhurried, the voice of someone who makes calls like this with some regularity. Speaking. This is Colonel Fedorov, Office of the Deputy Minister of Defense, Infrastructure and Communications Security Division. We've been given your name by General Voronov's office as a recommended contact for a consultation project. Is this a convenient time to speak? I looked down the hallway toward the living room. I could see the edge of the sofa, Victor's feet, the blue light of the reading lamp. Yes, I said. Please go ahead. ****. The project, as Colonel Fedorov explained it over the next 12 minutes, was this. The ministry was undertaking a comprehensive review of the communications security architecture for civilian government infrastructure, hospitals, utilities, municipal networks, following a series of vulnerability assessments that had revealed significant gaps. They were assembling a small external advisory group, former service personnel with relevant expertise. My name had appeared on 2 independent recommendation lists. General Voronov. I hadn't spoken to him in 2 years, but I was not surprised he remembered me. The work I'd done in Stuttgart had apparently traveled further than I'd known. The engagement would be a 12-month consultancy, Fedorov said. Mostly remote analysis work, with 4 to 6 site visits over the year. The compensation structure is. He named a figure. I was quiet for a moment. I'd need to review the project brief before I commit, I said. Of course. I'll send it through tomorrow morning. Secure email. You'll need to use the address on file with the ministry. That's still active. Good. A brief pause. One more thing, Natalia Ivanovna. General Voronov asked me to pass on a specific message. Go ahead. He said, the Eastern Relay Assessment. We're still using it. I closed my eyes for a second. Tell him thank you, I said. I will. You'll have the brief by 9 tomorrow. We hope to have the group confirmed within the month. We said good evening and the call ended. I stood in the hallway for a moment, phone in my hand, looking at the rectangle of light from the living room doorway. Then I walked back in. Victor looked up from his book. Who was that? Work, I said. I sat back down on the sofa. He watched me for a moment. What kind of work? A consultancy project. Defense Ministry. The silence that followed was not the comfortable kind. I thought you were done with all that, he said finally. I turned to look at him. I thought so too, I said. But apparently they didn't agree. He went back to his book. But he was entreating. I could tell by the way his eyes weren't moving. ****. The brief arrived at 9:12 the next morning. As promised, I read it at the kitchen table, coffee going cold beside me, making notes in the margins the way I'd always made notes, small, precise, the shorthand I'd developed over years of reading documents that needed to yield their meaning quickly. It was serious work, exactly the kind of problem I had spent the better part of my career thinking about. The overlap between military-grade security thinking and civilian infrastructure. The specific vulnerabilities that emerge when systems designed by engineers are operated by people without security training. The gap between what a network is supposed to do and what it actually does under real conditions. By the time I finished reading, 2 hours had passed and I had filled 3 pages of notes. I sat back. There was a feeling I remembered from the early years of my service, not excitement exactly, more like recognition. The feeling of a problem that fits the shape of your mind. The thing you were built for, presenting itself and saying, here I am again. Victor came in around 11 to make coffee. He saw the paper spread across the table. Still reading that? I finished, I said. I'm thinking. He poured his coffee and leaned against the counter. Are you going to take it? Yes. He was quiet. Then, Natasha. We talked about this kind of thing. The hours, the secrecy, we talked about active service, I said. This is consultancy. I'll be home every night except the site visits. But it's always something. It's always. He stopped. Tried again. I thought that part of your life was finished. I looked up at him. Victor. What part of my life are you imagining was finished? He didn't answer. The part where I think about complex problems. The part where I'm useful in ways that have nothing to do with this apartment. The part where I existed before I met you. His jaw tightened slightly. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. I said it without anger. Just clearly. You meant the part that doesn't fit neatly into the life you had already decided we were living. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, someone was mowing the lawn 2 buildings over. A completely ordinary sound, indifferent to everything happening in this room. The medals, I said. He looked at me. Yesterday. When you put them outside the door. I said I wasn't throwing them away. They're not old junk, Victor. Still no anger. Just the fact of it. Inside that box is a distinguished service cross. A unit citation, a photograph of 7 people, one of whom I identified at a memorial service. Those things aren't old junk because you don't know what they mean. They're not finished because you'd rather they were. He set down his coffee cup. I didn't know what was in there, he said. You didn't ask. That sentence sat between us. He didn't have an answer for it. Not because he wasn't intelligent, Victor was intelligent. But because there was no answer that didn't require acknowledging something he had been avoiding acknowledging for 4 years. Asterisk. I went to the bedroom and took the box out and brought it back to the kitchen table. I opened it. I lifted out the medals one by one and set them on the table. The commendations. The Distinguished Service Cross in its small hinged case. The NATO unit citation in its envelope. The letters, refolded along their original creases. The laminated photograph. Victor stood at the counter and watched. I held up the photograph. 7 people. Kabul, 2011. The light was wrong for photography that time of day, but someone had taken it anyway, and the result was this: 7 people squinting slightly, half smiling, the particular expression of people who are tired and working and not yet ready to be done. This is Sergeant Morozov, I said, pointing. He teaches secondary school now in Novosibirsk. We speak every few months. I moved to the next face. Captain Eriksson, she's Norwegian, she's at NATO headquarters in Brussels. We email. The next. Lieutenant Bazarov. He died in 2015. That's his face. Victor was very still. This one is me. I pointed to myself 20 years younger, thinner, the expression of someone who does not yet know what the next decade will contain. And this is what old junk looks like, from the inside. I set the photograph down. I'm taking the consultancy, I said. And I'm going to find somewhere to hang these. I picked up the Distinguished Service Cross and held it for a moment, the familiar weight of it, and then I set it back in the box carefully. Victor hadn't moved from the counter. Natasha, he said. Quietly. I looked at him. There was something in his face I hadn't seen before, not guilt exactly, but the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he didn't intend to arrive at and is now looking at the view and understanding, for the first time, where he has been walking. I didn't know, he said. Any of it. I didn't. I know you didn't. I closed the box. But you could have. I was here the whole time. Asterisk. I called Colonel Fedorov the next morning and confirmed my participation. He sounded genuinely pleased. General Voronov will be glad. He specifically requested you for the Eastern Sector analysis. Tell him I'm looking forward to it. He'll want a preliminary meeting. Probably early January. That works. We went over the basic logistics, the security protocols for the remote work, the schedule for the first site visit, professional, clear, the language of people who have serious work to do. When the call ended, I sat for a moment at the kitchen table. The medals were on the shelf above my desk now. I had put them there the previous evening, one by one, the photograph in the center. They looked right there. They had always looked right somewhere. I simply hadn't found the place until now. Victor had watched me hang them without saying anything. Then he had gone to bed. We had not resolved anything. Some things don't resolve cleanly, they settle into a new shape, and you live in the new shape, and you find out over time whether the shape is livable. I didn't know yet whether it was. What I knew was this: I had 19 years of work that had mattered. I had a consultancy that would matter. I had a box of objects that carried the weight of things I had actually done, and I knew what each of them meant. And no one's ignorance of that, however sincere, however long, could change what they were. The phone rang again. My former colleague Galina. calling to tell me she'd also been approached for the project. Did you say yes? She asked. This morning, I said. Good. I could hear her smiling. It's good work, Natasha. The real kind. I know. I'll see you in January then. January, I said. We said goodbye. I poured a second cup of coffee and opened my notebook and began writing the preliminary thoughts that had been accumulating since I'd read the brief, not because anyone had asked for them yet, but because when a problem fits the shape of your mind, the thinking starts whether you tell it to or not. Outside the window, the city did what cities do, and in a government office somewhere across the country, the Eastern Relay assessment I had written 7 years ago was apparently still doing its job. Some things age. Some things don't. I had learned, over 19 years, to know the difference. The metals on the shelf caught the morning light. I kept writing.